May 12, 2017. A nurse in a London hospital sits down to pull up a patient's chart. She types in her login. Her screen turns red. A message appears. Oops, your files have been encrypted. A countdown timer sits underneath it. Pay in Bitcoin or lose everything. Forever. She calls a colleague over. His screen shows the exact same message. Within minutes, every computer in the department is glowing the same red. Then every computer in the building. Then every hospital connected to the same network across the entire country. Ambulances are turned away mid-route. Surgeries are canceled. Somewhere, a doctor grabs a pen and paper. Because the system holding a patient's allergies, blood type, and entire medical history has simply stopped responding. By the end of the day, this single piece of software will hit over 200,000 computers in more than 150 countries, almost all of it within a few hours. And the person who ends up stopping it isn't a government agency. It isn't a security firm. It isn't even a team. It's one 22-year-old sitting in his childhood bedroom spending about $10 without fully understanding what he's about to do. How does a piece of code take down hospitals, banks, and government offices on 4 continents in a single afternoon? And how does it get stopped by accident? To understand what happened that day, you have to go back a few months earlier, to a leak almost nobody outside of cybersecurity really understood at the time. A mysterious group calling themselves the Shadow Brokers released a cache of hacking tools online. Not just any tools. These belonged to the NSA, the United States' own intelligence agency. Some of the most sophisticated cyber weapons in existence, built quietly over years by one of the best-funded hacking operations on the planet. Buried inside that leak was something called Eternal Blue. In simple terms, Eternal Blue exploited a flaw in how Windows computers talk to each other over a shared network. It let an attacker jump from one machine to the next automatically. No email required, no click required, no human mistake required at all. Here's the part that matters most. Microsoft had already found this exact flaw. They released a fix for it a full month before the leak went public. But knowing about a fix and everyone actually installing it are two very different things. Millions of computers around the world hadn't updated. Some hadn't updated in months. Some hadn't updated in years, especially in places like hospitals, where machines run critical equipment and can't just be casually restarted in the middle of a shift. Whoever built WannaCry took that leaked NSA tool, wrapped it inside ransomware, and released it into a world that was, without knowing it, almost perfectly set up to let it spread. That wasn't the only decision that made this attack so dangerous. There was one more detail buried in the code, something nobody paid attention to until it was almost too late. Most ransomware before this needed a person to make a mistake, a bad link, a bad attachment. Someone somewhere has to click something. WannaCry didn't need any of that. Once it infected a single machine, it used Eternal Blue to scan the surrounding network for other vulnerable computers and jump straight to them. No click, no email. Nothing but one unpatched machine sitting quietly on the same network as an infected one. In a hospital with hundreds of connected devices, a single infected computer could compromise dozens more within minutes. And it wasn't just hospitals. Spain's largest telecom company was hit. So was FedEx. Universities across multiple continents, train stations in Germany, even Russia's own interior ministry, one of the hardest hit organizations in the entire outbreak, despite having no connection to whoever built the malware. Security teams around the world scrambled to understand what was happening in real time, watching infection counts climb by the minute with no clear way to stop it. But investigators tearing apart the malware's code found something strange. Every single time WannaCry ran, before doing anything else, it tried to contact one specific web address, a long, nonsensical string of letters. The kind of domain nobody would ever think to actually register. If that domain didn't respond, the malware continued its attack exactly as designed. Nobody had thought much of it, until one person did. At the same moment hospitals were shutting down across the UK, a 22-year-old security researcher named Marcus Hutchins was sitting in his bedroom at his parents' house, doing what he did most days, pulling apart malware samples to understand how they worked. He got a copy of WannaCry and started digging through the code. That's when he noticed it too. The strange domain. The nonsensical string of letters the malware kept trying to contact. Nobody had registered it. So he did. Not because he understood what it would do. Researchers register weird-looking domains all the time, just to see what kind of traffic hits them. It cost him about $10. He had no idea what he'd just triggered. The moment that domain went live, WannaCry started getting a response every time it checked in. And that response turned out to be a kill switch. Nobody is entirely sure why the malware's own creators built it this way. The leading theory is that it was meant to detect whether the malware was running inside a simulated testing environment, the kind researchers use to safely study malicious code, and shut itself down if it was, as a way to dodge scrutiny. But because that exact domain had never existed in the real world, the malware always assumed it was safe to keep spreading, until the second Marcus registered it. From that moment forward, every new machine WannaCry tried to infect would check that domain, get a response, and immediately stop itself before encrypting a single file. Marcus watched infection counters that had been climbing exponentially all day suddenly flatten out within minutes. Confused, and honestly a little worried he'd made things worse, he posted about what he was seeing, trying to figure it out in real time, alongside security teams scrambling across multiple continents. It took a while for anyone to fully understand what had happened. A researcher working from his childhood bedroom had just slowed one of the fastest-spreading cyber attacks in history to a crawl, almost by accident. But by the time the kill switch activated, the damage was already done. WannaCry had infected over 200,000 machines in more than 150 countries, including major systems inside Britain's National Health Service, Spain's Telefonica, FedEx, and Russia's own Interior Ministry. The spread had stopped. The cleanup was only beginning. WannaCry caused an estimated $4 billion in damage worldwide. Marcus Hutchins, briefly hailed around the world as an accidental hero, later found himself facing unrelated federal charges tied to malware he'd allegedly written years earlier as a teenager. If you enjoy true cyber stories that sound stranger than fiction, subscribe to Cyber Files for more.